that could secure a multi-million-dollar deal for his tech company, and now he was stranded in the middle of nowhere. Grabbing his phone, Ethan held it up, pacing in circles as if a magical signal would appear. Nothing. "Of course," he muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He glanced at his car, its glossy black exterior gleaming mockingly in the early morning sun. With no other option, he began walking toward the town, his tailored suit and designer watch painfully out of place against the rustic scenery. It didn't take long before Ethan reached the main street of Maplewood, a quaint stretch of mom-and-pop shops, a general store, and a single traffic light. The entire town looked like it had been plucked out of a postcard, with its tree-lined sidewalks and flower boxes overflowing with bright blooms. A bell jingled overhead as Ethan stepped into the local auto repair shop. The garage smelled like motor oil and rubber, and the sound of clanking tools echoed from the back. A woman in grease-streaked overalls emerged, wiping her hands on a rag. "You lost?" she asked, her tone flat, but her hazel eyes sharp as they scanned him from his crisp suit to his polished shoes. "My car broke down about 3 miles out," Ethan replied, trying to keep the irritation out of his voice. "I need someone to tow it and fix it, quickly." The woman raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "What kind of car?" "A 2022 Jaguar F-Type," he said, expecting at least a flicker of acknowledgement. Her expression didn't change. "Sounds fancy. Too bad I don't have a magic wand to fix it on the spot." Ethan blinked, caught off guard by her sarcasm. "Do you have a tow truck or not?" The woman sighed, and tossed the rag onto a nearby workbench. "Yeah, I've got one, but it's not exactly built for speed." She gestured toward the rusted, decades-old truck parked outside. "You want to wait here or come along for the ride, Mr. Fancy Suit?" "I'll come," Ethan said tightly, already regretting his decision. The ride to his car was far from pleasant. The tow truck rattled and groaned with every bump in the road, and Ethan clutched the edge of his seat, his expensive watch glinting in the sunlight. The woman, who had introduced herself as Lila Carter, seemed to find his discomfort amusing, her lips twitching with the hint of a smirk every time they hit a pothole. "You don't exactly scream small-town charm," she said, glancing at him as she steered the truck with one hand. "I'm not here for the charm," Ethan replied tersely. "I'm here because I didn't have a choice." "Well, welcome to Maplewood," Lila said dryly. "We don't bite, usually, when—" They finally reached his car. Lila got to work hooking it up to the truck, while Ethan stood by, feeling utterly useless. "So what's the rush?" she asked, not looking up from her task. "I have an important meeting back in the city," Ethan said. "Something you probably wouldn't understand." Lila straightened, her hands on her hips. "Oh, I understand. Plenty," she said, her voice tinged with annoyance. "You think just because I run an auto shop in a small town, I don't know what pressure feels like?" Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but stopped when he noticed the flash of determination in her eyes. He didn't have a comeback for that. Back at the garage, Lila examined his car while Ethan paced impatiently. After a few minutes, she emerged from under the hood, wiping her hands on her overalls. "Looks like you'll need a new part, and it's not something I keep in stock. I'll have to order it, and it'll take a couple of days to get here." "A couple of days?" Ethan repeated, his voice rising. "That's unacceptable. I'll pay you extra to expedite it." Lila crossed, her arms unimpressed. "Money doesn't make the delivery guy drive faster. You'll have to wait like everyone else." Ethan ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, frustration boiling over. "Is there at least a decent hotel in this town?" Lila smirked. "There's a cozy little inn down the street. It's no Ritz-Carlton, but it's got running water and a bed. Think you can manage?" Ethan bit back a retort and grabbed his bag from the car. He was halfway out the door when Lila called after him. "Hey, city boy!" He turned, his patience hanging by a thread. "Try not to scare the locals with that scowl. We're not used to your kind around here." Ethan didn't bother responding. As he walked toward the inn, the realization hit him. He was stuck in Maplewood, a place that felt like it belonged in a different century. But what he didn't realize was that the same town that had just upended his carefully controlled life would soon change it forever. Ethan woke to the shrill crow of a rooster. For a brief, disoriented moment, he thought he was dreaming, but as the sound pierced through the thin walls of his room at the Maplewood Inn, reality came crashing back. He groaned, burying his head under the pillow in a futile attempt to block out the noise. The bed was comfortable enough, but the rustic charm of the inn, complete with floral wallpaper and creaky wooden floors, was a far cry from the penthouse suites he was used to. He checked the time on his watch, his stomach grumbling as if on cue. Breakfast. 20 minutes later, Ethan found himself walking into Maplewood's only diner. A bell jingled overhead, and the smell of sizzling bacon and freshly brewed coffee hit him like a warm embrace. The place was buzzing with chatter, the kind of easy familiarity that only existed in small towns. Sliding into a booth by the window, he picked up the laminated menu and scanned it. No avocado toast, no imported espresso. Just pancakes, eggs, and an impressive list of pies. He sighed and flagged down the waitress, a cheerful woman with a beaming smile. Before he could order, a familiar voice cut through the din. "Well, well. City boy survived the night." Ethan looked up to see Lila standing by the counter, a steaming mug of coffee in her hand. She was dressed in her usual grease-streaked overalls, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Somehow, she looked effortlessly radiant, though Ethan would never admit it out loud. "I'm amazed you didn't send a search party," he quipped, setting the menu down. Lila smirked and sauntered over, sliding into the seat across from him without asking. "Figured you'd either adjust or run screaming back to the city." "Tempting," Ethan muttered, glancing out the window. "But my car's still in pieces, thanks to you." "Thanks to me?" she echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Pretty sure I'm the one fixing it, not the one driving it into the ground." Ethan opened his mouth to retort, but the waitress returned with a coffee pot, filling Lila's mug and glancing at him expectantly. He ordered black coffee and scrambled eggs, deciding against his usual complicated latte. As they waited for the food, Lila leaned back in her seat, watching him with an amused expression. "So, what's the plan, hotshot? Just gonna brood around town until your fancy car's back on the road?" "Something like that," he replied flatly. She shook her head, her ponytail swaying. "You're gonna drive yourself crazy sitting still. Tell you what, when you're done here, I'll give you a ride to the shop. You can hover over me while I work and make sure I don't sabotage your precious car." Ethan frowned. "A ride? You mean in that death trap of a tow truck?" Lila grinned mischievously. "Nope. My bike." His frown deepened. "You've got to be kidding." She stood, draining the last of her coffee. "Meet me out front in 10, or don't. Your call." With that, she was gone, leaving Ethan staring after her in disbelief. True to her word, Lila was waiting outside the diner 10 minutes later, straddling an old motorcycle that looked like it had seen one too many rainy seasons. Ethan hesitated, on the sidewalk, eyeing the bike with suspicion. "You're serious about this?" he asked. "Dead serious," she replied, tossing him a spare helmet. "Hop on, city boy. I promise I won't let you fall." Hard. Ethan mumbled something under his breath but climbed onto the bike behind her, trying to ignore how close he had to sit. The engine roared to life, and they took off down the road. The ride was predictably bumpy, the worn suspension doing little to soften the impact of Maplewood's uneven roads. Ethan clung to the sides of the seat, cursing every pothole. Lila, on the other hand, seemed perfectly at ease, weaving through the streets like she'd been born on two wheels. Halfway to the shop, they hit a muddy patch and the bike sputtered to a halt. Lila groaned, kicking the stand down and hopping off. "Stay here," she said, grabbing a stick from the side of the road to dig the tires free. Ethan ignored her instructions, stepping off the bike and surveying the mess. "You call this reliable? More reliable than a Jaguar that dies in the middle of nowhere," she shot back. Despite his irritation, Ethan couldn't help the small smile tugging at his lips as he watched her wrestle with the bike. Eventually, he joined in, his Italian loafers sinking into the mud as they worked together to free the wheels. By the time they succeeded, both of them were splattered with dirt, and Lila was laughing. "You look like you've been through a war," she teased, wiping a smudge of mud from her cheek. Ethan glanced down at his now ruined suit and shook his head. "This is ridiculous." "Ridiculously fun," she corrected, climbing back onto the bike. "Come on, Mr. Fancy Suit. Let's finish this ride before you lose your sense of humor completely." Back at the garage, Ethan decided to stick around, claiming he wanted to make sure the repairs were done right. In truth, he was curious. About the shop. About her. But his hovering quickly grated on Lila's nerves. "You know, if you're going to stand there criticizing everything I do, you might as well help," she said, handing him a wrench. "I don't do manual labor," he replied, eyeing the tool like it might bite him. "You do now," she said, firmly, pointing to a bolt that needed tightening. Reluctantly, Ethan crouched beside her and got to work, following her instructions with a mix of clumsiness and determination. At one point, he fumbled and smeared grease across his sleeve, earning a burst of laughter from Lila. "You're a natural," she said, smirking. "Natural disaster, maybe," he replied, surprising himself by laughing along with her. As the day wore on, their banter turned to deeper conversation. Ethan found himself opening up about his life in the city, the constant pressure, the endless competition, the feeling that no matter how much he achieved, it was never enough. Lila listened, quietly, her usual sarcasm giving way to something softer. She shared her own story, telling him about her father and how he had taught her everything she knew about cars. The garage wasn't just a business to her. It was her connection to him, her way of keeping his memory alive. For the first time, Ethan saw past her tough exterior and glimpsed the passion and vulnerability underneath. And, to his surprise, he found himself wanting to know more. By the time they called it a day, the tension between them had shifted. It wasn't just the mechanic and the millionaire anymore. It was something more, something unspoken, but undeniable. Ethan leaned against the workbench in the garage, watching as Lila wiped her hands on a rag, her focus sharp and unyielding. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, casting the space in warm, golden light. Despite her teasing and tough exterior, there was something about her, something that had kept him here far longer than he'd planned. "Bad news," Lila said, snapping him out of his thoughts. She tossed the rag onto the bench and met his gaze. "The part I need to fix your car is back-ordered. It won't get here until Monday." "Monday?" Ethan repeated, disbelief lacing his tone. "That's 3 more days." "Congratulations, you can count," she said with a smirk. "Guess you're stuck here a little while longer, city boy." He let out a frustrated sigh, running a hand through his hair. 3 more days in Maplewood. 3 more days of rooster wake-up calls, muddy roads, and no cell service. He should have been furious. But instead, there was a strange pull in his chest, a quiet voice telling him to stay. Maybe it was the way Lila looked at him, challenging and unflinching, or the way the town seemed to slow down time, forcing him to breathe for the first time in years. "Fine," he said, straightening. "But I'm not spending another day sitting around doing nothing." Lila raised an eyebrow. "Oh? And what exactly do you plan to do?" "I don't know," he admitted. "You're the local. Show me around. Prove to me that this place isn't as boring as it looks." Her lips twitched with amusement. "You're giving me a lot to work with, Grant. But lucky for you, there's a fair in town this weekend. Starts tonight." "A fair?" Ethan asked, skeptical. "Yeah. You know, rides, games, fried food, fun stuff," she said, her tone laced with mockery. "Think you can handle it?" He crossed his arms, his lips curving into a faint smile. "Try me." The Maplewood Fair was exactly what Ethan expected, and nothing like he expected at the same time. Strings of twinkling lights crisscrossed the grounds, casting a warm glow over the carnival rides and game booths. The air smelled like popcorn, funnel cake, and cotton candy, and the sound of laughter mixed with cheerful music in the background. It was chaotic, loud, and utterly charming. Lila led the way, her confidence evident in every step. She was dressed in a simple pair of jeans and a flannel shirt, but to Ethan, she looked radiant under the fairground lights. He followed her to a booth where a row of glass bottles was lined up, the goal being to toss a ring onto one of them. "Think you've got what it takes?" Lila teased, handing him a small stack of rings. "Please," Ethan said, rolling up his sleeves. "This is child's play." It wasn't. After missing every single throw, Ethan scowled as Lila barely stifled her laughter. She stepped up, grabbed a ring, and with one smooth flick of her wrist, landed it perfectly on a bottle. "Beginner's luck," he muttered. "Sure," she said, grinning as the booth attendant handed her a small stuffed bear. She turned to Ethan and held it out. "Here, a consolation prize for your loss." He took the bear, his fingers brushing hers briefly, and shook his head. "You're enjoying this way too much." "Guilty," she said, her grin widening. "Come on, there's more to see." They wandered through the fair, sampling fried Oreos and sharing a candy apple. Ethan found himself laughing more than he had in years, the weight of his responsibilities momentarily forgotten. Lila's energy was infectious, and he couldn't help but be drawn to her quick wit, her easy smile, the way she seemed to light up the world around her. Eventually, they found themselves at the Ferris wheel. Lila tilted her head toward it. "Ever been on one of these?" "Not since I was a kid," Ethan admitted. "Perfect. Let's change that," she said, grabbing his hand and pulling him toward the line. The contact was fleeting, but it left a warmth lingering in his chest. Minutes later, they were seated in a small gondola, the ride slowly lifting them higher and higher. The view was breathtaking. Maplewood stretched out below them, its twinkling lights blending with the stars above. Ethan leaned back, letting out a contented sigh. "You look like you're actually enjoying yourself," Lila said, her tone teasing but her expression soft. "Don't let it go to your head," he replied, his lips curving into a faint smile. "But, yeah, I haven't felt this relaxed in years." "Maybe that's your problem," she said, turning to face him. "You're always running, always chasing something. Maybe you just need to slow down." He looked at her, her words sinking, in deeper than he expected. "Maybe," he said quietly, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "But slowing down isn't an option for me. Not with everything riding on me." Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then sighed. "My company. It's not just about money or success. It's my identity. Everything I've built, everything I am, is tied to it. If I fail—" He trailed off, his jaw tightening. "Failure isn't an option." Lila studied him, her usual sarcasm replaced by something gentler. "Ethan, you're more than your company. You know that, right?" He didn't respond, the weight of her words pressing against his chest. After a moment, he turned the conversation back to her. "What about you? Why are you so rooted here?" She leaned against the edge of the gondola, her gaze distant. "Maplewood's my home. It's where my dad raised me, where he taught me everything I know. This garage, this town, it's all I've got left of him." She paused, her voice dropping. "I've had people look down on me for being from here, for not wanting more. I've been left behind before, and I guess I'm not sure I could trust someone who doesn't see the value in this life." Her words hung between them, heavy with unspoken fears and truths. Ethan reached out, his hand brushing against hers. "I see it," he said softly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The Ferris wheel reached its peak, the cart swaying gently in the breeze. Lila turned to him, her hazel eyes searching his, and before either of them could second-guess it, he leaned in. Their lips met in a kiss that was sweet and tentative, but filled with promise. The world below them faded, leaving only the stars above and the quiet connection between them. When they finally pulled back, Lila's cheeks were flushed, and Ethan couldn't help but smile. "So," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "was that part of your plan to make the most of your time here?" "Not exactly," he admitted. "But I'm not complaining." The Ferris wheel began its descent, but something had shifted between them. They weren't just the mechanic and the millionaire anymore. They were two people standing on the edge of something new, something that both thrilled and terrified them. The Ferris wheel came to a gentle stop, the carnival sounds below rushing back into focus. Ethan and Lila stepped off the gondola, the quiet intensity of their kiss still lingering between them. Neither spoke right away, the unspoken weight of what had just happened forming a bubble around them as they wove through the crowd. When they reached the edge of the fairgrounds, Lila gestured toward the parking lot where her truck was parked. Guess I should get you back to the inn, she said, her voice light, but her eyes avoided his. Ethan tilted his head, studying her. You're trying to act like nothing happened back there. She shrugged, a small, guarded smile playing at her lips. What do you want me to say? That I've been swept off my feet by a city boy who probably has a penthouse apartment and a calendar booked 6 months out. Because newsflash, I'm not that girl. No, Ethan said softly, stepping closer. I don't want you to say that. I want you to admit that maybe, just maybe, you feel this too. Lila's breath hitched, but she quickly masked it with a roll of her eyes. You're awfully confident for a guy who couldn't even win me a carnival prize. Ethan smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. You can deflect all you want, Lila. I'm not going to pretend this doesn't mean something. Not to me. She opened her mouth to respond, but whatever she was about to say was cut off by the shrill ring of Ethan's phone. He winced, pulling it out of his pocket to glance at the screen. His jaw tightened as he saw the name of his assistant flashing across it. Work? Lila asked, her tone clipped. Yeah, he admitted, silencing the call. But it can wait. She crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. Can it? Because something tells me you're not the kind of guy who lets work wait. Ethan hesitated, the truth of her words hitting harder than he wanted to admit. I'm trying, he said finally. For the first time in a long time, I'm trying. Lila's gaze softened, but she didn't respond. Instead, she turned toward the truck. Come on, let's get you back. By Monday morning, the part for Ethan's car had finally arrived. He stood in the garage, watching as Lila worked her magic under the hood. The silence between them was heavier than it had been before, charged with the knowledge that his time in Maplewood was running out. All set, Lila said, wiping her hands on a rag as she straightened. Her tone was breezy, but her eyes betrayed her. Your car's good to go. Ethan didn't move. He leaned against the workbench, his arms crossed, staring at her like he was trying to memorize the way she looked in that moment. The grease on her hands, the smudge on her cheek, the way her hair had fallen loose from her ponytail. Come with me, he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. Lila froze, her eyes widening. What? Come with me, he repeated, stepping closer. To the city. I don't know what this is between us, but I know it's real. And I know I don't want to leave it behind. She blinked, her breath catching. Ethan, I can't just... Why not? He interrupted, his voice desperate now. You're not tied to this place. You could come with me, see the world, do something different. Her expression hardened and she stepped back, putting distance between them. This place is my world, Ethan. It's not something I can just walk away from. You don't get it. Then help me understand, he pleaded. She shook her head, her voice trembling. You're asking me to leave everything I've ever known for someone who's going to leave the moment things get hard. I can't do that. I won't. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He opened his mouth to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but the look on her face stopped him. She was scared. Of him. Of this. Of everything he represented. Lila, he began, his voice soft, but she cut him off. Just go, Ethan, she said, her tone firm despite the tears brimming in her eyes. Go back to your life. You don't belong here. The drive back to the city was a blur. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tightly, the world outside the car flying past in streaks of green and gray. His chest felt hollow, the weight of Lila's words pressing down on him. By the time he reached his penthouse apartment, the familiar view of the skyline did little to comfort him. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring out at the city he had once fought so hard to conquer. It all felt meaningless now. The meetings, the deals, the endless pursuit of more. None of it compared to the way Lila had looked at him, the way her laughter had filled the quiet spaces in his heart. Days passed, but the ache didn't fade. If anything, it grew stronger, gnawing at him with every passing hour. He tried to throw himself back into work, but his focus was gone. The boardroom felt suffocating, the city too loud. He couldn't stop thinking about her. The way she challenged him, frustrated him, made him feel alive in a way he hadn't in years. Finally, one evening, as he sat in his office staring at a pile of untouched paperwork, Ethan made a decision. He picked up his phone, called his assistant, and gave her a list of instructions. Delegating responsibilities.